Peter Dutton is the federal leader of the opposition. He's joined us during his visit to South Australian River Murray communities. Peter, welcome back. You promised on our program when we talked to you late last year you'd visit flood-affected communities when the emergency had passed. You're making good on that pledge in January.
Yeah, thanks, Ricky. It's nice to be back on the program, and we had a really good visit yesterday through the Riverland with Tony Passon, and we've got another day today, just meeting with tourist operators, people that have been impacted by the event, just listening to some of the lessons they've learned, the experience on the ground. And I didn't want to come here during the course, the height of it. There's nothing worse than just standing up on a flood levee for, a 15-minute photo opportunity and then jumping back in the plane. So we started at Renmark yesterday, and then we'll work our way all the way back to Adelaide today. But it's been a really important engagement, and I've been very grateful for the time that people have given to us.
I don't know if you've been along the South Australian River Murray before. What impression has it left on you, the people and the landscapes that you've seen there?
Well, it's a pretty amazing event. People talk about 74 and 56 and 31, but this is certainly a major event. The levee system is quite remarkable. It's a great credit to the local councils on the ground and the work that's been done by landholders and others within the community, because obviously that makes it a very different event. I think the other thing that's really striking is that, most of us from the East Coast are used to floods like we've seen in Lismore or in my hometown of Brisbane or Queensland after, pretty regular flooding there over the years. It's a sort of a catastrophic event. It's acute. There are rescues, the cars wash downstream, all the rest of it. But the preparedness that takes place and the modelling, the expectation, and the dealing with it is one aspect that sort of stands in contrast to a flood as we would otherwise know it. And secondly, and most importantly, is that it's an incredible event when you see those floodplains filled and those communities and those ecosystems that will come back to life after the waters have receded, and the tourism opportunity for people to go and see that now and over the next few months. So it's really an encouragement for people to go and have a look now, which is what the local tourist operators are encouraging, but also to book your holiday over the next couple of months. Don't pull back from that and don't cancel, for goodness sake. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event potentially, and it's a pretty amazing thing to see from the air and on the ground.
Yes, good point. And the South Australian Murray sits at the end of one of the biggest river catchments in the world in the form of the Murray-Darling Basin. In floods like this one, we see all this water coming through, yet it's one of the only places in the nation where we've got ferries crossing floodplains. Your shadow cabinet colleague and the local MP there, Tony Passon, he's talked about blue sky projects like the Sturt Highway Bridge over Springcart Gully. Is it time we lifted South Australia's river crossings into the 20th or even 21st century?
Well, there's no question about that. We went to about 5 or 6 different locations yesterday where there's a requirement for a road upgrade, for lifting of a particular causeway, for a bridge upgrade or a bridge replacement. There's a compelling argument that Tony puts in relation to the Sturt Highway as well. So there's a lot to invest in. As I said, kudos to the local councils for the way in which they've responded and coordinated on the ground. But it's clear that some of the roads need to be upgraded, and that's really the whole idea of mitigation and building back a road so that it's not impacted on the next flood occasion. And it might happen every 40 or 50 years, but we should be designing and planning now once the waters recede for those roads and for those connection points where communities are separated at the moment. People can't get to work or get to an aged care facility or get to a hospital to provide the services to a loved one. Then that's something that we need to address and be very cognizant of as the rebuild takes place.
Yeah, community representatives, councils and others have expressed frustration that sometimes we're just putting bitumen over potholes and broken up roads and they just break again. With our regional roads in disrepair, your coalition colleague, National Party leader David Littleproud, when we've talked energy, he refers to the energy grid as being gold-plated or even platinum-plated. Why are we platinum-plating the energy network but only paper-plating our road network?
Well, and we see what happens when that's the case. It gets washed away, or there's bridges where the approach roads are cut, or it's and the consequence, just the inconvenience as much as anything, asking people to drive, an extra 45 minutes to work makes, particularly with the cost of electricity and or cost of fuel, it makes it near impossible. And some people, as we heard yesterday, have resigned from their work because the numbers just don't add up when you're doing 3 or 4 hours casual work a day and you've got to drive an extra 45 minutes each way. So I think it's a compelling argument that the roads should be built to a higher standard. Certainly when the Coalition was in government, we put more money into these sorts of projects, and the money is there waiting for the federal government to draw down on to spend as we come out of this event.
Now, we've got limited time, so we'll move on to the topic of the Indigenous Voice. Speaking of the Nationals earlier, they made an early call saying they're not going to vote for it. What is the Liberal Party position on this Indigenous Voice, and why is your position different to the Nationals?
Well, Ricky, we've taken a position that we want the details so that we can make an informed decision, and so far the Prime Minister is refusing to give that detail over, which becomes more and more peculiar by the day. There are basic questions, and I think this is the stance of millions of Australians, frankly, that we all want a better outcome for Indigenous Australians, but we want a situation where we understand what we're being asked to vote for. And at the moment, the Prime Minister can't answer basic questions, and I think people are quite confronted by that, because we now see the Prime Minister's office changing transcripts from interviews that the Prime Minister has had where basically he's just botched it. And the last thing you want is a situation where the efforts go backwards in relation to Indigenous Australians, and if the Prime Minister sets up a process by way of referendum, it fails, then we will see that reconciliation effort going backwards, and the Prime Minister will have to explain why he's botched it, and from the day one he's discounted the reasonable questions of people that should be answered. So we'll go through our party room process when Parliament returns. We'll have that respectful discussion with our colleagues. There'll be a range of views, and the Liberal Party always operates in that democratic fashion. It's not a position imposed from me on high. I want to listen to all of the colleagues, and I've spoken to a lot of them over Christmas, and we'll arrive at that position and make that announcement in due course.
It's often said in politics, the devil's in the detail. It does seem the referendum on a republic at the turn of the millennium fell over when the detail finally emerged. Is that where we're heading with a voice to Parliament?
I think it's very obvious that there are different ways in which the voice could operate. So in Alice Springs at the moment, we've got a national tragedy that is not just unfolding, but it's been taking place for a period of time. I went up there a few months ago and called on the Prime Minister to intervene straight away, to send up resources, and we've seen in the last 48 hours the Mayor of Alice Springs pleading with the Federal Attorney General, who has control of the Australian Federal Police and the resources within that portfolio, to send help to Alice Springs because law and order has broken down. Now, when I was there, the voice was very clear from Indigenous elders and from women, mothers, grandmothers in that community that they wanted additional support. And the problem to me seems to be not that there isn't a voice and that the voice isn't worthy of being listened to. The fact is it's not being acted upon. And the Prime Minister has ruled out sending any resources to Alice Springs. And I think that the travesty of kids being sexually abused, of not going home at night time because they're scared to do so, so they're out committing crimes during the hours of darkness, and then they're sleeping during the day, so they're not going to school. They're the issues that I want addressed as quickly as possible, and the Prime Minister can't even tell us that the voice would address those issues in a tangible way, because it seems at the moment that this government's unwilling to act, even when the voice from Indigenous Australians is very clear.
Your local MP there, you've been journeying the Riverland and river communities with Tony Passon, put out a flyer just this week about the Australian flag, expressing concern that the Greens don't even want to do press conferences in front of the flag as we enter a new millennium with a new sovereign. What does it mean for our sovereignty when we've got voices in Parliament that want to undermine Australian nationhood?
Well, it's an absurdity. I mean, we have a proud Indigenous history. We've got a proud British history. And we've got a great migrant story to tell. And our country is a blend of all three, no one above the other. And we have to be very proud of our place on the world stage, of what we've been able to achieve in our country. We live in the greatest country in the world. We shouldn't be ashamed of our history. We should learn from it, and we should be very proud of the fact that we're the envy of many countries of the world. We have a strong and stable democracy, which is why people are really questioning whether there's a need to change the Constitution, because if you change the Constitution and the High Court interprets it in a particular way, then you can see our system of government, the decision-making process change very quickly, and Australians understandably are reluctant to do that. And we should be celebrating our flag, we should be celebrating Australia Day and all that's great about our country, and the people who want to rewrite history or ignore certain parts of history, that's not the majority view in our country, and good Australians should stand up and say so.
Well, Peter Dutton, Leader of the Opposition, thanks for your visit to the river communities of South Australia today, and thanks for joining us on Flow.
Pleasure, Ricky. Thank you very much, mate. Take care.